We are now live.
Balwan sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Balwan Singh Mehta. Welcome you all on the talk series India's State of Employment, organized by Center for Work and Welfare at IMPRI, Delhi, in association with Counterview as a media partner. Today is the second special talk of the series on one of the most debated and key issues, labor migration in South Asia, shared concern. This this program would be around of around 45 minutes, comprising around 20 to 25 minutes of presentation by the speaker, and followed by chair's remark and discussion and questions. So let me briefly talk about the today's topic, how it is related to our talk series. Actually, the migration is today is on national, regional, and global topic and agenda, and is an important livelihood strategy. There is a strong association between poverty and migration, but it is not always true, particularly in the case of high-skilled people. As estimates shows that there are over 150 million migrants around the world. A significant number of these are from South Asia. Nearly 1 in every 3 person in India is a migrant, and 1 in every 6 urban dwellers is a migrant in Pakistan. And similar statistics for migration are found in other South Asian countries. With increasing urbanization in South Asian countries, a lot of people, skilled, unskilled, poor, rich, males, females, are migrating across the countries and from rural to urban areas for better livelihood opportunities in life. However, there are, in particular in the COVID period, the 2 sets of migrants which we always talk about. One is one who moved from the rural area to urban area and settled in the urban area. Another who moved from the rural to cities, another place to place to do their work and come back to or go back to their native places. And these are seasonal and circular migrants. And over the period, these short-term or circular migrants has gone up significantly during the last, last decade, 2 decades period, which are the most vulnerable and poor. So these short-term migrants still have a foothold in rural areas and their native places, and majority of them have returned to their native places in case of any adversity. The similar situation we have experienced during the lockdown period in the recent past. We also conducted a small study of this return migrant during COVID period, lockdown, which also find that the similar kind of results. Most of the return migrants during lockdown were short-term migrants or seasonal migrants, and mainly poor, who have their foothold in rural areas. So, that's what these more poor and vulnerable who needs policy attention. So, in this context, Professor Babu, today's speaker, along with his 2 colleagues, Akhil Ranjan and Mohan Mani, brings out an excellent report, Migration in South Asia, Poverty and Vulnerability, to understand the underlying causes of migration of the poor from both within the country as well as from regional perspective. So today, chair, we have eminent, migration and urban studies expert, Professor Bhagat from IIPS Mumbai. He's not only one of the top experts, but he is also one of the vibrant speaker. We have conducted a lecture, I think 1 month back, on this lockdown and migration issues, and which was highly debated and highlighted across the media. And I welcome Professor Bhagat to introduce the topic and start the delivery. Thank you, sir, and welcome.
Thank you, Professor Mehta, and thank you to IMPRI and Dr. Arjun Kumar for inviting me again. It was very nice experience last time, as I received a lot of questions and I have to think over that, and that was really enriching for me. So today, I think in that continuation, we are discussing migration in South Asia, shared concern. and the lecture will be delivered by Professor Babu P. Ramesh, and it is very relevant and very pertinent in contemporary context. As we have seen that the pandemic related to COVID-19 and the followed lockdown started from 25th March has brought migrants to the forefront to various sections of society. Policymakers, the politicians, academia, media, everybody is now talking about migration, migrants. So the question very simply asked and very ignorantly people ask this question, why so many millions of people walk down on the roads? So much visibility was there. And now the government has brought out the figures. Actually, how many millions have returned back? We don't have exact figures. That is also an issue. Although many have been quarantined while they return to their respective villages, native places. So data is of course there, and then people moved on government arranged buses and trains. So data already there, but there are many people who walk down, who return on bicycle, who arrange their private vehicle, paid exorbitant transportation cost. So there was a huge stream of returning migrant. So this is brought the migration issue at the very core of our academic or policy making activity. Now the government has come out with a figure of 10.5 million people have returned. This was the figure reported to the Lok Sabha on 14th September. And the 6 states which received the return migrants are UP, the largest one, Bihar, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and West Bengal. And here the 80%, more than 80% return migrants have returned. And these 6 states constitute about 50% of India's population. So this is also throwing light on regional disparity. What is happening to different states of India? India has a number of states and we are a federal country, but to the extent of the regional disparity. So migrant issue or issue related to migration has brought again to the fore regional disparity, the rural-urban divide and urban inclusion. What will be our nature of urbanization so that non-agricultural jobs or employment, more employment opportunity can be provided to the people of India, along with access to healthcare and educational facility. So these are the related questions. So we are not now looking at migration as a separate issue, but interconnected issue with economic, social, and political dimensions. So I think our multidisciplinary effort is very, very desirable. And in this context, I think I welcome Professor Babu P. Ramesh lecture on labor migration in South Asia. He's an economist, and we hope something very important and excellent ideas will be presented, and that will be benefiting all of us. So with this remark, I invite Professor Ramesh to present his lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let me introduce Professor Babu, who is today's speaker. He is currently Professor and Dean at School of Development Studies, Ambedkar University, Delhi. Prior to joining Ambedkar University, he was Director, School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, IGNOU, and faculty at V.B. Green National Institute, Noida. His research interest lies on labor, informal sector, and development studies. And our other discussants are Professor Raghuveer Bista from Tribhuvan University, Nepal, and Professor Dr. M. Zakir from Bangladesh, Comilla University, Bangladesh. So, and Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director AMP. So I now request Professor Babu to please start the delivery. Babu.
Yeah.
Yes.
So shall I?
Yeah. Yes. Shall I? please start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. And it's a very good opportunity to speak in this important seminar series of IMPRI. IMPRI is a new institution which we are all looking with lots of looking at IMPRI with lots of expectations. So I am very happy that Balwant and Arjun invited me to participate in this seminar series. And you know, the broader topic given was migration in South Asia. And migration in South Asia, as you know, it's a very, very broad topic. And talking about migration in 25 minutes was a nearly impossible task. But what I have been doing, what I was planning to do, or what I am right now doing is that I'm recently, quite recently, like as Balwant has already explained, we have released a report, a South Asia migration report. It was released globally on 4th of September. And this South Asia migration report was an outcome of an overall South Asian Alliance work for about 3 years, where 3 academicians from India, we authored that report, but we had 8 persons working in different countries. In fact, 7 persons, because the India report was prepared by me, and 7 other persons from different other countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Maldives, and Afghanistan. They together produced 8 country reports, and we have prepared a regional report, authored a regional report based on inputs from the country report. So in this particular report, we have highlighted certain concerns. So my presentation will be mostly on like how, like what are the similarities we have seen in South Asian context, what are the shared concerns, and what are the possibilities of common solutions. And I'm very happy that in the beginning itself, Dr. Balwant has briefly explained the quantitative related matters of South Asia's, especially India's migration and South Asia's migration. And we have also got a very good, the appropriate chair for the session, Professor Bhagat, who knows totally about the migration scenario, especially in terms of the numbers and all. And as he has pointed out, what we require while approaching migration and migration studies is a interdisciplinary approach. Interdisciplinary approach which will give equal importance to economics, sociology, politics, psychology, all related aspects of migration, because migration is a phenomenon that cannot be approached purely through an economics lens or purely through a demography lens or purely through a sociology lens. All these lenses we have to juxtapose, then only we will get a clarity in terms of like how to understand the migration scenario. So let me quickly move to the contents of the presentation. We can see that labor migration is the central phenomenon in South Asia. And as Balwant has explained, South Asia has, every country in South Asia has lots of migrants. It can be 1 in 3 or 1 in 6. That is the kind of migration thing. And when we attempted this SAPE report on migration, we have given importance to certain aspects. For instance, migration can be seen as like, we can broadly divide migration into 2, where one is the migration of the marginalized or migration for the for taking out a living. And the second category can be migration for economic upgradation. That means migration of the well-off. But by design, in this report, we have given more attention to migration of the poorest of the poor. That means those people who are migrating for a living and those people who are actually doing a distress migration and who are leaving their natives because they don't have any other way out. So one particular aspect is this particular division. That means the focus is on migration marginalized. And the second thing, we have given importance to all three aspects of migration. For instance, internal migration, intra-regional migration, and international migration. We can see that South Asia itself, South Asian nations, for instance, India or Pakistan, or if you take Maldives, we can see that these countries are themselves home to lots of migrants from other countries in the South Asian region. So there are lots of issues related to intra-regional migration also. So we have given attention to internal migration, intra-regional migration, and international migration. And we have also given some attention to refugees and stateless people, because their conditions are also sometimes similar to migrants' conditions. So we have in the approach migration with a very standard definition of migration. Rather, the definition itself was very inclusive, so that it will be including all the marginal segments who are on the move forcefully or due to distress, they are on the move. So we can see that there is a the focus of this report. We have given the centrality, lots of importance to the centrality of poverty and inequality, because this particular collective which initiated, which commissioned, or which invited us to work on this migration report, that collective is working on poverty, eradication of poverty and inequality in South Asian region. So the focus was given to poverty and inequality. You know, I don't have to explain all the details of migration and all, but at the same time, for the benefit of the listeners, I can quickly enlist what are the possible drivers of migration, or how migration is shaped in South Asian region, almost all the countries in South Asia, how this migration is being shaped. We can see that one of the major things is rural distress. The rural area is not in a position to provide adequate employment. Employment or labor absorption capacity of rural area is very less, and many a times there is a crisis of employment in rural areas. And this crisis has deepened during the recent past, where you can see that normally this seasonal migration is a pattern, and seasonal migration or circular migration is happening in a particular rhythm. But nowadays, we can see that in most of the South Asian countries, because of the rural distress, the farm sector in rural areas are also facing lots of challenges. And now this rhythm of seasonal migration is also affected. Moreover, that is the case with all South Asian countries. So we can see that there are lots of issues regarding the breaking of this seasonality, where like rural area, at least they were providing, these rural locations were providing some employment to the workers who have migrated to the urban centers during a particular season for a harvest or certain agricultural operations. They used to come back, but now that is also gradually, that scene is also changing. We could see that there are several issues that has deepened the rural distress, which include landlessness, debt bondage, farmer suicides, and several things are and it is not the story of India, it is the story of many of the South Asian countries. And the good thing with India is that even if we go by Indian experience also tells more or less similar story of South Asia, because India is such a huge, vast territory within South Asian region, that India is also more or less representative of the South Asian region. But what India exhibits, many other countries in South Asian region also shows that kind of trends. We can see that as earlier, Balwant and Professor Bhagat has, they have mentioned that we could see that there is a regional disparity, and urbanization is happening in a particular way, that rural people are finding that only way to survival is to move out to the urban areas. So what happens is that gradually urban areas are getting swollen, or getting it is becoming the space for lots of people from rural area, and there is not enough facilities to meet the primary basic requirements of these people on the move. And we could also see that in South Asian region, not only this rural distress, there are several other socio-political reasons that are also acting as push factors. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, we can see that all these countries are having very strong acute political tensions, or they had certain episodes at some point of time which really worsened the situation. And we could see that if we go by the global peace index, South Asian region as a whole is the second least peaceful region in the world. We could see that almost all the South Asian countries, especially major countries in South Asia like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and though it's a small country, even this Maldives, climate change is a very important thing. Like Maldives is under the threat of getting submerged in the near future, and Bangladesh has similar problems, and India and Nepal also have lots of natural calamities and environmental degradation related things that are also adding to the rural distress and pushing more and more people to this urban centers or centers beyond their country borders. So we could see that there are also lots of development induced migration where unplanned resource depletion is also leading to migration. So we could see that overall there is a kind of, there are multi-layered drivers for migration. And when this sort of migration happens, we could see that like many of these migrants, they move to a particular place, a destination where they don't know whether they will be getting enough facilities or whether they will be treated on a par with the local community and all. So let me come to the core of the discussion, that like what are the shared concerns? When we are talking about the shared concerns in South Asian migration scenario, we can see that the first and foremost shared feature is that most of the South Asian countries, internal migration is a very major stream of migration. For instance, in India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, we could see that internal migration is very prominent even compared to, even when we compare it to the international migration. We could see that another important aspect is that, which I have already explained, that is the importance of intra-regional migration. That means countries within the region, they are having strong migration connections. Now, the third one, when we are discussing migration related shared feature, we can see that there are lots of similarities in the patterns of women's migration. We can see, like when we are seeing this women's migration, we could also see that women are also migrating because of marriage and several other things. But many a times marriage migration is also a kind of migration through which there is a hidden labor migration is happening. That means many of these women who are following their spouse to their husband's areas, they will also be ultimately getting into the labor market. So when we see the South Asian scenario, we can see that there are certain dominating features that we can see. Many of the South Asian countries, patriarchal controls or patriarchal norms are dictating the migration scenario. We can see that familial or societal norms are playing very vital role in deciding migration decisions. Larger governance framework of migration is also highly influenced by these kinds of patriarchal controls. We could see, if you analyze the policies in South Asian region related to women's migration, we can see that many countries in South Asian region, they are keeping patriarchal values or patriarchal norms while designing migration policies. So accordingly, we can see that Some of the countries will ban women's migration for certain categories of employment. Some other countries, they will keep certain job restrictions for women. And because of all these things, we could see that in countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan, we could see that there are the migration of women are considerably low. Now take the case of Sri Lanka, which is a women in Sri Lanka, women migrants are outnumbering their male counterpart. We may think that situation is better, but in Sri Lanka also there are several restrictions that regulates women's free movement. For instance, there is a family background record system that is introduced in Sri Lanka recently, and as per this system, a local official has to give a clearance to the women migrants before they migrate from a locality, and the local official has to certify that this particular women, they don't have any children in the family who are left with no female guardian. So these kind of restrictions on women's migration, along coupled with the increasing desire of women to migrate and get a better employment, that will lead to a situation where women resort to illegal routes. And if they are resorting to illegal routes, what will happen is that it will also lead to undocumented migration. Accordingly, there are pernicious practices of illegal recruitees, including trafficking and sexual abuse. Recently, during the COVID period, there was a movie, Malayalam movie released in Netflix, and it's a very, since it is with lots of with English subtitles, it's very interesting movie to watch. See You Soon. That is also talking about the problems of domestic workers who are going to Middle East and how they are getting ill-treated because they are resorting to this undocumented and illegal migration. There are many other examples, but I just thought that film is a very telling media through which we can quickly understand the situation. We could also see that coming to the other shared destination, most of the South Asian countries are having same migrant receiving country or major destination is same, that is GCC countries, Gulf countries. And within this GCC countries territory, migrant workers from South Asian countries are competing for jobs, they are undercutting wages, they are working with deplorable working and living conditions. And in many other countries, Asian countries itself, Jordan, Singapore and all, workers from many other South Asian countries, they are sharing same working and living conditions. We could also see another important shared aspect is that in most of these countries, South Asian countries, we could see that the support from the state is gradually declining. And there is an argument that it's a kind of emergence of or the strengthening of neoliberal state. Neoliberal state is a state which is moving away from pro-poor interventions. So state is an important authority in migration, and we could see that state has three important roles as facilitator of informed and right-based migration, protector of migrant rights, and provider of benefits and recognition to migrants and refugees. But we can see that in most of the South Asian states, there is not much active state intervention happening in terms of promoting informed and right-based migration. There is not even proper adequate data stored in terms of migrants. We could see from our discussions in India also, we can see that many cases governments do not have adequate data to support their policy prescriptions. We could also see that protective legislations, regulatory systems, all these things are very weak in most of the South Asian countries. Here in India also, we have this Interstate Migrant Workmen Act, but the efficacy of that act, everyone knows that it's not very effective. And most of the international conventions and adoption and honoring of these conventions and all, we can see that South Asian countries are all lagging behind. And now, there is another binding factor that has come. When COVID-19 has come as a game changer all on a sudden in South Asia migration scenario, we could see that COVID also brought lots of shared concerns. The destiny of South Asian migrants, most of the countries in South Asia, it's a shared destiny. Almost all the South Asian countries saw this exodus. There is problems of losing jobs and deteriorating working conditions. People are getting discriminated, and there are issues related to returning home. There are issues related to closure of borders, stranded migrants. All these issues are similar. And migrants are those kind of people who are not in a position to stay away from employment for long, because they are the poorest of the poor, and they cannot stay far from employment for quite a long time. So most of the migrants in South Asian region who have got dislocated due to this COVID are looking for reintegration and return passage. And we could also see that women and children have become more vulnerable. When we take the case of COVID and interventions, we could see that in most of the South Asian countries, there is a failure of state mechanism. We could see that many of the countries, for a few days, the state mechanism was not in a position to provide adequate income support, social security benefits, or healthcare to the migrants. So we could see that in the coming days, when this pandemic is continuing and gradually even after pandemic vanishes, we could see that the economic divide between nations and economic divide between regions, the rural and urban, is going to get deepened. And there will be more and more xenophobia towards the outsider. And there will also be deep weakening of democratic struggles and democratic rights. We could see that in most of the countries, most of the South Asian countries, we could sense that probably the labor legislations are getting weakened. And we have examples from most of the countries. We could also think about this shared features of South Asia migration also provides an opportunity for us to think about possible common solutions. One possible common solution is to have these effective policies for the reintegration of displaced migrants. For instance, many of these migrants who got displaced are the migrants who are working within the region. So there should be a regional solidarity where countries in South Asia, they should ensure dignity to intra-regional migrants. In order to ensure solidarity for this intra-regional migrants, the first and foremost thing is that in South Asian region, we have to have a peace within the region. But gradually, there are tensions in South Asian region even now. So this is a major thing that needs to be addressed. And there are also issues related to legality and illegality of migrants and refugees, citizenship of cross-border migrants. All these things are these things need to be amiably solved. Then only we can effectively address the issues related to migrants. We should also have collective initiatives to negotiate with migrant receiving countries like GCC countries. And we should also have lots of initiatives towards promoting migrant rights and right-based migration by utilizing the provisions or the protective frameworks of labor laws and signing and honoring relevant international labor conventions and all. So this is what I thought I would highlight in this presentation, and probably we can continue the discussion in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Babu, for this detailed presentation and some of the highlights, which is really you're focusing on, which is particularly distress migration, which is the main theme of your report. So now I would like to request Professor Bharat to give his remark on the presentation. Bharat sir.
Yes, yes.
I think it's an excellent presentation, and I must thank Professor Ramesh for bringing out so many issues in such a short time. Really, it is very challenging task, and he has clearly presented the various drivers, and these drivers are very important. These drivers are embedded with each other. So we have agrarian crisis along with social and cultural conflict, and then climate change. Now, each one is reinforcing each other, and it is academically it is a challenge for us to segregate, and perhaps it is not possible to segregate the factors. But that is one thing that is coming out in his presentation, and we also subscribe to that, that we have huge agrarian crisis, and that shows in the GDP also. Now we have in India, we have 14% GDP, 45% workforce is dependent on 14% GDP. What will be the per capita income, and how per capita income can be doubled if agricultural production rises? Is there any market? Who is going to consume? Are we able to export? These are, I think, some of the questions. And then the weather failure, there is a drought and floods and other things. So we are very enthusiastic about economic reforms or labor reforms or bringing out certain legislation related to agricultural sector. But I don't see that it can effectively help the farmers and the community in the rural areas. Because even if there is a more production, it cannot guarantee higher income. And that is, I think, crucial thing we should realize in our policy and program, that people in rural area want non-farm jobs, complementary to farm. So this complementarity, I think the agriculture and industry divide we have to bridge somewhere if we want to withstand this agrarian crisis and really to increase the income of the rural people, or particularly the farmers. And there are large number of agricultural laborers who are not able to migrate also. They are willing to, so there is a huge potential migrants in this country. So what we see, the manifestation of migration, huge number. Along with that, there are many people who want to migrate. You can see the wage differential between Kerala and Bihar. Given the opportunity, many people of Bihar will like to migrate to Kerala if they get 3 times wages higher than that. So I think there are many people, potential migrant, huge migrant. So this is very important, and we need to see these drivers together. And very important, as you have highlighted, there are a lot of issues related with governance. And illegality is created through our mechanism of administration and law. Some people are turned to be illegal by one stroke of the law. I think these problems should be tackled with humanitarian approach. And South Asia being both destination as well as origin. This is unique thing about South Asia. The South Asia is a destination, receiving country, as well as from where a lot of people are migrating. From India itself, 17 million have emigrated to Middle East and other parts. So this is how I think your suggestion that yes, South Asian Forum or SAARC Forum, they should be come together and bring this migration issue. That can also sort out many things, political things. And there are sentiments attached to the illegal migration, although we don't know what is size of illegal migration. But politically it becomes so sentimental that whole migration issue is derailed. Whole economic aspects of migration, integration of migration with development is derailed. And then what happens if this type of crisis comes, then we see the huge problem. we are not able to deal with. And rightly, you see this during this pandemic, several countries have relaxed that those who are illegal migrants, those who are refugees, they can also avail health facility. Malaysia has done, Thailand has done. So several European countries have done. No need of showing whether you are illegal or legal. You should get health facility, because if things are hidden, then it can spread the disease more. So now when the crisis is coming, government is responding. Why not before the crisis comes, one should respond? And why illegal migration? As you have rightly pointed out, there is a huge crisis, and therefore people resort to illegal migration. So even if you talk about legal migration, safe migration, orderly migration, we have a compact under Sustainable Development Goals, but then people continue to migrate illegally. And this has brought out recently that huge number of illegal migrants hiding, and they were not able to be transported because they don't have that ID proof and etc. So now this is deepening the crisis. So health related issues, development related issues, governance is related. Governance, access to health facility and development, I think this need to be integrated. But what we are doing actually in migration, governance is a top priority. So whether it is legal or illegal or trafficking, these aspects are dominating. But the integration of development with development, I think that should be the focus of the agenda. Migrants should be treated as human beings. They are the inputs in production. They are the labor force. Without that, they provide services. They should, every country or region or urban centers, this has been, I think, came to the focus, and now people are realizing this thing. So there was a huge negative attitude earlier against migration. Everybody very against about migration, but that I hope will subside, and let us see something where there will be more positive integration of migrants with development within the framework of sustainable development. But challenges are more. Now, it is said that COVID is going to be equalizer. It doesn't differentiate between rich and poor. It is not like that. It is not, because rich people, even if they fall victim to COVID, they have access to healthcare. They have means and materials to withstand. It is not so for the poor people, poor among the migrants, slum dwellers. So these are some of the place-related vulnerability. So vulnerability is not just that poverty of course, but where the poor are, because the place decide about access to health facility. A poor living in slum in Mumbai can have some access. They can go. If what they are lacking is money, if money is given to them, they can access to certain private. Same thing cannot happen with the poor in Bihar or Jharkhand, because health facility is not there. Even if somebody transfers money in their account, they will not be able to access. So place matters, and the vulnerability place. So we have to see multidimensional poverty. Poverty is not simply the calorie or income poverty, but we have to see housing, health, all these multidimensional poverty we have to see. So all these are academic inputs, and of course policy should be sound, and involvement of a partnership between government, civil society, and whole approach to migration, that how to integrate, I think that should be the focus. And hopefully COVID has generated a lot of ideas, concerns, and consciousness, and let us translate into, and by this type of webinar will be very, very helpful to outreach our ideas to the people and policymakers. So I think with these comments, I will end here. Thank you. Yours is muted, Professor Mehta. Yours is muted.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us and even giving some very good and pertinent remarks. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Arjun Kumar to raise some issues. Arjun, Dr. Arjun. Hello.
Yes, yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Yes, yes.
I was just checking with sir, but I think he's not able to connect.
Yes, yes, I think so.
Professor Raghuveer. And we also have Professor Bharat, but let me also show the report which sir has come out with. The report is available in sapp.org, sapp.org, and the full report can be downloaded from there. And Anshula, if you can also have the article which sir came. Article also came in Indian Express of Babu sir. Link we will share in the chat box and other places. And Bharat sir, if you want to ask anything.
Hello.
Yes, yes, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Arjunji, Balwanji.
Sir, video.
And, is it okay?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
And I feel it's again a privilege to hear so nicely the very knowledgeable and full of content lecture delivered by Professor Babu and Professor Bhagat. Professor Babu just discussed about the distress migration. We all know that majority of the migrants are happening under distress, mainly by economic distress. But we also find the instances of migration by choice, particularly the consideration of getting higher education, acquiring higher education, and other things that improve the quality of life of a person. So I want to understand what are the reasons, basic reasons for this distress migration, and how do we compare the two kinds of the migration, and what are the policy options before the government to minimize this distress migration, particularly in case of India?
Thank you, sir. I will also just add few things, then Babu sir can, I think, respond. Yes. Very pertinent issues which sir is raising. In fact, the report came last month. Now, many of the international organizations are rightly raising this point that the level of poverty, especially in South Asia, will be now almost 50% of the world poor population. And there is a real worry that food and nutrition security, also the livelihood, since the finance minister has also recently, the interview came day before, that we don't know when the vaccine will come, and we cannot hold the stimulus, and the government will provide stimulus to the poor if the case will be so. And the government has also come up with something called NMIS, National Migration Information System. Nothing much has been done, or that's not very much working. In fact, that was announced when Bhagat sir gave his lecture, and now sir has also mentioned that in Parliament around 1 crore figure we are reporting those who have returned back. The actual numbers are very quite high. Given then rightly Babu sir is raising this point of solidarity, especially in South Asia, since not just the very pockets of India, but also in Bangladesh, in Nepal, there are city regions, industrial regions, but there are also regions which are also conflicted, very poor pocket, the Naxal problem, and then in Bangladesh we have Rohingya problem. In all our borders are very new and very contested areas, so that also our dependence upon this kind of pandemic and what kind of marginalization and vulnerabilities can be those are very high. So the focus on shared concern and solidarity, especially for subcontinent as a whole, is something that as all population of subcontinent, we should think about. There are rightly many, since we are talking about migration, the issue of identity cards, CA, NRC, and so many things going on across South Asia. But now is really the time for this solidarity. I recall one of the story I just heard in a podcast yesterday in the Economist. There also, the story of a Nepal laborer coming to India and then going back also to the eastern part of India, and now having nothing to do. And there are so many health concerns, and many surveys we also did. These concerns are coming. So I really wanted to know from Babu sir in their analysis, what sort of solidarity steps can be done from private sector, civil society organization, and especially between the governments, and what can be the prospective road ahead to overcome these challenges in this pandemic and recession times. Thank you again so much for your lecture, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bharat and Arjun. Thank you, Dr. Bharat, for flagging certain things which like I didn't get time to focus on, because basically, like I have explained, that migration can be, one is migration out of choice and the other one is migration out of distress. And when we come to distress migration, or when we are focusing on distress migration, how government can effectively intervene to address distress migration, if we are discussing that thing, the first and foremost thing is that government should address the migration issues at the point of origin itself. That means, like when Professor Bhagat was explaining also, like he was also highlighting that there is a place related disadvantage. For instance, in many of the migration pockets, that means source regions, they don't have their native economy or local economy is in a distress situation where wages are very low, there is no adequate employment, there are no facilities, education, and many other infrastructure things, including health infrastructure, things are not available. So probably what is required more is more rural oriented policies in a country like India. For instance, rural, if we are not giving more attention, that will be a very dangerous thing. For instance, I could see that in my understanding of the situation, the programs like MGNREGA, they need to be strengthened, because these programs are the programs which provides a modicum level of social security to the people in the rural areas. Fallback options are provided, and even if a simple money transfer is done, many a times they are not going to get that money transfer things very quickly, that benefit is not coming. So we have to go back to the old Keynesian warfare, like workfare programs, where people will get, the people with highest marginal propensity to consume, they will get more and more money. So some kind of a policy that focuses more on this rural sector and provide benefits to them, that is a requirement. We could also see that even larger debates that is happening in India related to farm subsidies and support prices, all these things are very important, because we have to have institutional mechanisms or government aided institutional framework for microcredit, for support prices, and all these things. So probably in a country where or in order to strengthen this poorest of the poor, we have to support all these initiatives. But the larger trend that is happening in entire South Asia region is that many of these supports are gradually being withdrawn by the government. So that is a kind of a area where the collectives or the solidarities in South Asia needs to further their efforts. And coming to Arjun's thing, how we can forge solidarity, probably solidarities are developed and strengthened during crises only. So probably this crisis, we can see that there are lots of active South Asian solidarities emerging and working together. You can see that lots of discussions happening, lots of activities, lots of plans are in a way this kind of a crisis of uh, this particular crisis of COVID has provided some kind of a energy to break the inertia towards technology, leveraging technology for solidarity. You can see that most of the South Asian activists or academicians who are working for pro-poor activities, they are all now more connected, and that inertia for getting connected or the institutional deadlock in terms of using technology has come down, and probably this has provided a kind of a new way for forging solidarities and working together. You know, many a cases we could see that if you take the case of new economy workers, if you take the case of gig economy related issues, if you take the case of the labor power, like we have always understood that labor power is it is inseparable from labor. From labor we cannot take out labor power, but now the situation is going to a scenario where in industry 4.0 what is happening is that labor content is becoming very minimal, whereas even most part of the erstwhile labor power related things are getting shifted to robots and artificial intelligence and all these kinds of things. So all these cases, the entire workers' solidarities, they were at a dilemma and they were not in a position to manage with what is going around. But this particular pandemic and the churning due to this pandemic has provided lots of energy and strength, and we could see that though people are not physically meeting and staging protests or coming out together, we could see that through new media, through social media, people are effectively connecting. Issues are being communicated, but you know, it's a kind of a we cannot tell that like things are going, everything is going in a right direction, or everything can be addressed with whatever is happening. But there are new ways, new experimentations happening all over world, and we could see that various stakeholders are coming together, and probably this particular thing will definitely, like I am sure that like if you see the discussions, this is the period, the last 6 months, if you take the stock of academic engagement on pro-poor issues, we can see that the last 6 months has produced maybe tenfold output than what it would have been during a normal time. So that means this is a period of thinking, this is a period of critically looking at things and coming out with solutions. Probably like this is a kind of a period where we are planning for a better future, and I am sure that this period's output or the academic thinking or the scholarly debates and the exchange of ideas, that will definitely have an impact. It will like when we are discussing it in econometric analysis and all, the impact will be a lagged impact. That means immediately, like we may not be getting, but another 6 months from now or 1 year from now, when policies are being formulated, definitely this scholarship and the new realizations will play a crucial role. Because you know, though people are divided, some way or other, communication or technology is providing people to come in solidarity, work together, and lots of thinking is happening. So I am looking at it in a very positive manner, at least as a person who is working on pro-poor related agenda. I could see that last 6 months have been a very hectic period for all those people who are working on pro-poor agenda, and because of that thing, in global scene also we can see that there are lots of new ideas coming up, and new alternative models are coming up. Probably the new normal that is going to happen after this COVID era will be totally different for this collective action also. And I'm sure that that will totally change. And maybe after 6-7 months, we could see the initial results that like how things are going, worker solidarity. Because if labor laws are diluted or new kinds of systems are there, probably like there will be uh, kind of a defiance and some kind of a response coming from various corners, and quite unexpectedly these responses can totally change the game, and there may be certain other outcomes that is coming that we have seen at different historical junctures, and I am very hopeful that something good will happen because of this increased like dialogues and exchange of ideas which is happening in a global scale. That is it, and I'm sure that
Thank
we are all, yeah, Balwant, yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, and some raising some of the important issues, future issues like the new normal and the gig economy, which will provide the new kind of jobs, and even for the migrant. So what my last question, which I think, what are the good lessons we can learn from our other South Asian neighbors? Actually, like what you said in case of Sri Lanka, there is huge female out migration, and similarly, I think in Indian case there is a problem of portability. Like the people migrate, but they don't have entitlement if they move from one place to another place. So I would like some kind of reflection from other countries. What are the good lessons we can learn from, like our neighborhood? So only these two
Yeah,
questions will end the yes
yeah,
stimulus lecture. It's a nice lecture.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
This at least from this particular exercise, what we could see is that when we started this collective work on this South Asia migration report, there was a deliberate decision and there was a kind of a repeated reminders to ourselves that whenever we are conceptualizing South Asian scenario, we end up conceptualizing India and applying it to South Asia.
Yes, yes,
Whereas
yes,
many countries, for instance, what is happening in Bhutan and what is happening in Maldives, many a times we are not even giving attention because in terms of number, it is very,
yes, yes,
very
yes.
less. But at the same time, the rewarding thing for as a researcher for me was that like when we were going through each of the identified aspects related to each of the countries, we could see that there are striking similarities in all the countries, most of the countries. For instance, if we want to select an outlier from South Asia region, then Maldives is the only outlier.
Yes, yes,
Mostly because Maldives is a migrant receiving country. Maldives situation is slightly different, but all other countries in South Asia has very striking similarities. For instance, that kind of illegality discussions, the kind of othering, xenophobia, or attacking those people who are marginalized segments, all these things are similar in almost all the countries. And even in countries like Bhutan, I always thought that it is a country that is related to gross happiness index and all these kind of things. But along with happiness, there are similar stories happening in Bhutan also. So one striking thing is that this is a realization that when working together with South Asian partners, it's a realization that many things like gendered notions that is governing the migration scenario, or the xenophobia and othering, and pushing the marginalized people further. All these things are having it's a pan South Asian phenomenon, and it's an issue that requires some kind of a solid it needs to be addressed together also. For instance, if it is realized that it's a total phenomena for this entire region, from any angle, if you are seeing, whether it is from policy angle, from governments also, For instance, like in our report also, our major suggestion is that we should have solidarities in line with SAARC. That means this is the time for governments of various South Asian countries to come up together for effective solutions. For instance, as migrant providing countries, South Asia, if South Asia is together and if South Asia is acting as a bank of labor power for the GCC countries, like they are negotiating for oil prices, we can also negotiate for our human power. That means we are the major providers, and the entire GCC country is depending upon the South Asian countries. But since we don't have any solidarity, and since there are loopholes and illegal migration, everything happening, we are not in a position to bargain effectively. So if we are coming together, there are lots of possibilities for doing that thing. You can see that when this pandemic started, immediately there was some statements that we can have a South Asian fund to meet the issues of migrants and issues related to COVID, and India will be providing a good share of that fund and all these things. At least that kind of a thinking, gradually things are going towards from various quarters. That solution lies, it's a collective solution. So if you see it from the global international context also, if you are seeing South Asia from far farther distance, if you are seeing it from the global developed country context also, if you are viewing South Asian region, we could see from a distance that entire countries in this region, they are behaving similarly. So probably in order to strengthen the worker rights and informed migration, right-based things, everything, there should be some kind of for instance, a donor country, they can have certain kind of if they are very keen on promoting labor rights, they can stipulate that we won't entertain a kind of situation where the South Asian countries are competing and undercutting wages, which will lead to a situation of race to the bottom, where labor standards will go down. Now the thing is that in order to get a contract, we are competing. India and Bangladesh, they are competing with each other. There is no minimum level which is fixed. So solidarity can come from our side. Solidarity can come from generous employment providers side also. Many GCC countries, especially this kings and sultans of GCC countries, they in theory they believe that they have to support the South Asian countries because South Asian countries are providing this thing. And many countries, for instance in Nepal, they have when the king or some prominent person visited Nepal, they clarified it very clearly that in GCC countries we are not accepting any kind of money or advance entrance fee from the migrants, and we are also covering their entire expenses related to migration. That means ticket cost, everything. So then Nepal immediately introduced a policy called no cost, zero cost migration policy. But it was not very effectively implemented, but at least it was a realization for many of the Nepali migrants that they need not pay any money to go to Dubai, whereas the employer will provide everything. So that kind of charity or benevolence and all these things are available also. But effectively, we are not tapping that thing as a group. And if there is a kind of solidarity telling that we won't undercut wages, if a South Asian migrant is working in a particular country, they should get these kind of minimum facilities and this kind of thing. This is the basic minimum. Otherwise, the governments will not tolerate that kind of a migration. If that kind of a solidarity is coming, gradually we can effectively bargain with or not even bargaining, we can negotiate with these countries. Many of these countries, they will be sometimes paying also, but it may be siphoned off by middlemen. So this removal of middlemen will be effectively happening if we are working together. These are my immediate thoughts, but as Professor Bhagat clearly told in the beginning, these are all food for thought also. So maybe after this seminar also, like when we are thinking about these things, I will definitely keep these questions in my mind so that I can further work on these things.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Bhagat and Professor Babu, for this very enriching and very stimulating session. And we really thoroughly enjoyed this session, and we hope in future also we'll have this kind of a session. And soon we'll come out with a new topic, and hope to join you again. And thank you very much, sir. And thank you, Babu, both of you. And
Sir,
thank you very much.
should we have Bhagat sir for just a small remark?
Okay. Yes.
I just wanted to add a few things. Also, that Irudia Rajan sir, Professor Irudia Rajan also mentioned this thing, especially in the context of GCC countries, that many things are happening. We all know that from Kerala, a lot of migrants go to the Gulf countries, and he raised many of these things. Also in Europe, in EU, now again the integration and that thing. What they are also doing, that now they are also financing many of their expenditures. A furlough scheme is something which is going in Britain, wherein some support to those employers they are giving for the employees. And they have also come up with the green bonds for financing these kind of expenditures, especially in this pandemic. And I would once again like to congratulate Professor Babu Ramesh for highlighting this this regional integration of solidarity which is needed for South Asia. And with these words, Bhagat sir, I think some concluding remark. Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you. I think nice listening and the questions that raised, and of course, answers are not easy, but many things are enlightening. Particularly the case of Nepal, I think, zero cost migration. That's very important to emulate. And then Bangladesh also, Sri Lanka also, lot of support they are giving. The government is supporting. That type of support should also come from India. Now, recently, government has awakened. And when there is a crisis, then government comes into the picture. When the migrants are stranded, some political crisis, then these certain things are provided. It should be regular activity. For example, in Middle East, there is some sort of semi-feudal mode of recruitment and treatment of migrants. One of the dehumanizing aspect is that passport is forfeited. Passport is taken under the kafala system. There is a kafala system. Sponsors are there. Sponsors will be local person, and they are actually releasing the visa, and they are taking the migrants from South Asian countries and other countries also. Why the passport should be forfeited? Why the passport should be taken? Passport is an identity. Passport can be some alternative way should be there, where embassy can intervene. Some registration should be there, and passport must be. Now, Government of India can easily intervene with the GCC country, or South Asian country can come together and negotiate with. And this competition rising. For example, now a lot of people are migrating from Nepal. So, and from also UP and Bihar now, the people are migrating. Earlier, people from Kerala or other South Indian states were migrating. Now, a lot of people migrating from Bihar and UP. So cost is decreasing. So cost means wages are decreasing. So people are ready to work on low wages. And so this type of competition of lowering the wages and exploitation, increasing more and more exploitation, this can be easily taken by the country together. So solidarity or coming together of South Asian country, let us not, this has been highlighted by Professor Ramesh, that why not we can come together and let us have a minimum wage fix. Nobody should work less than $500 or something. Now people are working in a $25 per day, $20 per day. Sometimes when they go there, their wages are similar to wages of Kerala. People of UP and Bihar, when they are going to Middle East, they find themselves that similar wages are provided in Kerala. So these are, I think, larger issues of human exploitation, kafla system, semi-feudal mode of procurement of labor. I think this requires attention. But what happens in government policy and program? We are focusing more to diaspora. Diaspora are not Indian citizens. Diaspora are overseas Indian citizens. They have different passports. They have American passports, they have Canadian passports, but they have overseas Indian cards. But these are the people who are working in the Middle East. They are our citizens. And there is a responsibility of government to take care of them. And government of India is powerful. But then there should be sensitivity and there should be awareness also, concern also, and the policy formulation in this direction. So things are coming up. The second most important that Professor Ramesh also highlighted, gender aspects. Now, female migration is now coming as a very parallel and stronger dimension or of migration, particularly from Kerala and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Now, yesterday I was also listening one of the webinar, and then from Bangladesh it was reported that during COVID time, now remittances is declining, but remittances sent by women migrant is not declining. Because women are working as a domestic servant in care economy, they are there. So during pandemic also, they were taken care of by the employer. And so they are now becoming helpful in sending remittances, where the male counterpart, they lost the job. They are stranded. So these, I think, female migration should be taken care of, should be supported. So I think more proactive policy. It is not something of preventing migration. Always migration should be looked that, yes, it is one of the choice of livelihood. You want to do this or you want to do that. And migration is one option, because the constitutional right is there. Right to move is a fundamental right. And also right to emigrate also there. You cannot enter in other country, but you can leave your country. That is as per human rights, United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And most of the country are signatory to Human Rights Declaration of 1949. So one can leave the country, one has right, but one cannot enter the other's country. That has not been recognized. So I think this is how policy we are now to be more concerned and more sincere towards migration and integrating migration with, again, I say, these are the development aspects, but we are looking from governance. And why we are looking so much from governance? Because it has a colonial context. So during colonial time, what happened? There was indentured labor. Congress party raised this issue, and then Immigration Act was passed in 1922. And then it became an issue that, oh, governance, and then Indian people are going to South Africa or Central America, and people are exploited. This is how things have has been connected. But one more good thing that is not emphasized in many of our speakers and researchers, that India's freedom struggle is closely related with protection of migrants' rights. Because Gandhiji, when he returned back in 1893 as a young barrister, at the age of 24, he went to South Africa on the invitation of a Gujarati merchant, Dada Abdullah, to fight his case, company-related matters. And it was a job of 6 months. But when Gandhiji reached there, South Africa, he found that indentured labor were in very bad condition. And then he tried to organize them. And he did many things in next 20 years. He lived there for next 20 years. And what he was doing? He was doing, in fact, protecting the rights of the indentured Indian migrant worker. And that, I think, connection between India's freedom struggle and the lesson, I think we should sometimes need to historical pursuit. That's why I told that it is a multidimensional and every discipline has a lot of opportunity to contribute. So these are, I think, my some remarks. I hope it's a very interesting session, and Professor Ramesh has presented very well and brought out various dimensions, and I think it's very enlightening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think now we close the session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone and have a good evening. We crossed our time limit, but it was such wonderful listening to both our migration experts. And thank you, Balwant sir, for being brief. Balwant sir had many questions, but in the interest of time. And have a very nice evening, and we'll keep having you as an expert to strengthen our issues and look into our employment issues. Thank you. Have a good evening.